She said I made her feel alive again, said I reminded her of the woman she used to be, or maybe the one she never dared to become. And for a while, I believed she really saw me. But now, years later, I sometimes wonder, did she love me? The man I am, or the part of herself she saw reflected in my eyes? Have you ever looked back at someone who once loved you and really asked yourself, why? Was it the way you made her laugh, the quiet strength you carried, or just something about you that made her feel safe again? Maybe she used to look at you like you were everything she ever wanted. And then, one day, she didn't. Not angry, not distant, just gone. Like the warmth had vanished, but you never heard the door close, and you're left there, turning it over in your mind, asking, what did she really fall in love with? Was it me, or was it a version of me, someone she needed, someone she imagined? That question haunted me for a long time, until I met a woman named Ellen. I was 62. She had a smile that could warm up the coldest morning, elegant, sharp, mysterious. She didn't speak loudly, but everything she said carried weight. When we were together, it felt like I'd known her forever. She said I was calm, safe, deep, said I reminded her of the person she always wanted to become, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't falling in love with me. She was reconnecting with the part of herself she'd buried long ago, and I just happened to be holding the mirror. Carl Jung once wrote, "We don't fall in love with a person. We fall in love with the image they carry from our own unconscious." At the time, I didn't understand it. But now I see it with such clarity. It almost hurts. You're here because you felt that fire at the beginning, that emotional pull that felt like destiny, and then confusion, distance, silence. One moment, you were the center of her world. The next, it felt like you were invisible. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been loved, not for the man but for the story you represented? Not for your morning habits, not for your fears, your flaws, not for the man who sits quietly with his coffee and wonders if love ever gets simpler with age, but for the hope you sparked in her soul? If that's ever happened to you, even once, I want you to stay with me, because today I want to share two powerful truths, psychological truths, emotional truths. They may not be easy to hear, but once you understand them, you'll feel something you haven't felt in a while. Peace, and maybe even clarity about the kind of connection you still deserve. But first, drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever lived this story, or a 0 if you've somehow made it through. Love untouched by this kind of truth. Let's go deeper. Here's the first truth, and it may be one of the hardest to accept. People don't always fall in love with you. They fall in love with what you awaken in them. They fall in love because you carry something they feel is missing inside themselves. Not because you're perfect, not because you check every box, but because something about you resonates with a part of them that's been asleep for years. In Zen and Buddhist teaching, love isn't described as something you give or get. It's described as a reflection, a mirror. When someone loves you, they may not be seeing you clearly at all. They're often seeing themselves, their potential, their longings, the dreams they set aside, echoing back through your presence. Wise old master once said, "Love is not about the one you love. It is about the one who loves." Think about that for a second. It means the woman who said you made her feel alive again. She wasn't just drawn to you. She was awakening something in herself, a voice she hadn't heard in years. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine a woman who's always been the one others rely on, strong, capable, always the rock. Maybe she raised her kids alone. Maybe she kept her whole life together, career, family, everything, with her own 2 hands, and then one day she meets a man. Maybe someone like you, a man who doesn't need to shout to be seen, who's learned the value of stillness, a man who walks with quiet confidence because life has humbled him enough to let go of the noise. And suddenly, something shifts in her, not because he's flashy or charming, but because his calm feels like something she forgot she needed. He reminds her of a life she never let herself live, a slower pace, a deeper breath, a softness she buried while carrying the weight of everything. In that moment, he's not just a man, he's a symbol, a doorway, a living glimpse of who she might have been if she'd ever felt safe enough to rest. But here's the truth: most people miss when someone starts relying on you to feel complete, when they cling to the feeling you represent rather than the person you truly are. The bond gets fragile because if you ever stop matching that image, even slightly, if you show doubt or fear or simply your humanity, that illusion starts to crack. And when it does, it's not always graceful. You stop being the idea. You become the man, and sometimes she pulls away, not because you failed her, but because the feeling she was holding on to was never really about you. It was about her. The peace you carried reminded her of the peace she didn't know how to create on her own. That's the risk of being someone's emotional stand-in. As one poet said, when a person loves you through, they're longing. It's not your love they're holding, it's theirs. Now let's go deeper. Here's the second truth about why people fall in love with you, and this one's even more hidden than the first. Sometimes when you meet someone, you don't just spark attraction, you stir a memory that lives beneath the surface, something they didn't even know was there. Carl Jung called this the anima or animus, the inner opposite. Zen calls it recognition of true nature. Whatever the name, here's the idea. Inside every man, there lives a quiet image of a woman, not a fantasy, not a checklist, but an emotional echo. A symbolic pattern shaped by early bonds, mother, sister, lover, friend, and inside every woman, an inner man, a silent figure in her emotional world, born from her father, her first heartbreak, the protector she never had, or the boy who made her laugh when she was still young and hopeful. These internal figures live in us quietly, until someone walks into our life and matches that shape, and when they do, it doesn't feel like meeting someone new. It feels like recognizing someone you forgot you knew. It hits you like warmth in winter, sudden, familiar, intense. You can't explain it. You just feel it, like they've always been there, even if they just walked into the room. That's not coincidence. That's the unconscious at work. They didn't fall in love with you because of your job, or your hobbies, or how you texted them at the right time. They fell in love because something in you awakened a memory they didn't know they were holding. You became the face of something ancient inside them. That kind of love feels overwhelming. It can feel spiritual, destined. But here's the challenge. If it's only based on that internal image, if it never grows into something grounded and real, it's like standing on a cloud, beautiful, but impossible to live on. Have you ever had someone fall for you fast? So fast, it almost didn't make sense, and then, just as quickly, it faded? It wasn't because you changed. It wasn't because you did anything wrong. It was because the spell wore off. That hidden image, the one you unknowingly matched, stopped lining up with reality. The projection faded, and she didn't know how to stay with the man behind the mirror. But let me ask you this, was that really your job? To carry the weight of her past, her hopes, her missing pieces, or were you simply showing up as yourself, hoping to be loved for who you really are? There comes a point in every relationship, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow, when the truth starts to show. The way they sigh when they're tired, the way they shut down during conflict, the small routines, the quiet insecurities. That's when the illusion breaks, because no one can live as someone else's symbol forever. Eventually, the mask falls, and you're not the fantasy anymore. You're the person, a man with a past, with quirks, with morning breath and stiff knees, with stories she's already heard 3 times. And if the relationship wasn't built on recognition, real, mutual seeing, That's when it starts to tremble, not from betrayal, not from neglect, but from the quiet truth of becoming human. Again, but here's the beauty in that moment: if, and only if, both people are willing to stay when the fantasy fades, to stay when it's not magic, but choice, to love not the idea, but the person in front of them. That's when real connection begins, not from illusion, but from acceptance, not because you fill each other's empty spaces, but because you see each other's whole story and choose to walk alongside it anyway. That's the kind of bond that lasts. I remember sitting in a little cafe one early spring afternoon, the kind of day where winter is still in the air, but the sunlight makes you believe in warmth again. That's when she walked in. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to impress anyone, but she had a presence, stillness, a quiet dignity that made everything else go soft. Her name was Margaret. She was in her late 70s, maybe early 80s. She'd been married, widowed, found love again, lost it again. She spoke with a kind of peace, like someone who had lived fully and forgiven herself for all of it. And I'll never forget what she said to me. Every man I ever loved showed me a part of myself I needed to reclaim. She didn't say it with regret. She said it like a woman who had learned to bless even the heartbreak. I asked her, "Did any of them truly see you?" She paused, smiled, that kind of smile that holds both sadness and grace. "Eventually," she said, "but only when I stopped chasing the fantasy, only when I let go of being someone's dream and started letting someone care for the woman I really was." That stayed with me, because maybe that's what we're all really looking for. Not someone to save us, not someone to relive the fire of youth, but someone who sees us as we are, still growing, still healing, still human, and chooses to stay. So if you've ever wondered, why did she love me so deeply, only to drift away? Why did the connection feel electric, then dissolve in silence? You're not alone. These are the questions that visit men in the quiet of the night, long after her name is no longer spoken out loud. But maybe now you can ask a better question. What part of her was she meeting in me? Was she drawn to the man I truly am, with my edges and my aging hands? Or was I standing in for something she lost? Because here's the truth. Being someone's mirror can feel powerful, but being seen, truly seen, that's where peace lives. That's the kind of love that doesn't burn out. It settles in. It grows old with you, because it's not built on illusion. It's built on truth. So I'll ask you, have you ever been someone's reflection? Or have you had the courage to let someone care for the man you really are? If this speaks to you, leave a comment. Share your story. I read everyone. And if you're still here, thank you. Because I hope you leave this moment not just with more clarity about others, but with more compassion for yourself, because now you see the difference, and that's where real love begins, not from longing, but from truth.